Good afternoon, good morning. Hello to everyone from Dublin. Warm greetings from the University College Dublin. My name is Renee Hewlin, and I'm the 2021 Craig Dobbin Chair, visiting professor from Canada. I'm really pleased to introduce the moderator for today's session on lacrosse, Kennedy, who's CEO of Lacrosse Ireland and a colleague of mine at University College Dublin. So with that, I'll leave it to Michael to introduce our speakers and have a great session.
The introduction, we're really pleased to have the opportunity to take part in this event. It's really been a privilege to be involved, and we're glad to have with us individuals both from the Iroquois Nationals lacrosse team and also from the Irish lacrosse team. So as Renee noted, I am the CEO of Ireland Lacrosse. I work, it's totally voluntary. I work full-time at University College Dublin, and I was also a player on the Irish lacrosse team over a 15-year span. And I'm very pleased to welcome two players from the Iroquois Nationals, Aidan Fern and Devin Buckshot, and Sonny Campbell from the Irish lacrosse team. So before we really get started, I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves, to give a bit about their background. So maybe Aidan, would you like to start off?
Yeah, for sure. So kwe welta si na nige Pegasin Walalan. So good morning, everyone. I'm happy you could all make it here on this call today. And so my name is Aidan Fern. I'm an 18-year-old member of the U21 Iroquois Nationals team heading to Ireland. Next summer. Maybe I'll see a few of you on this call there. And we can meet in person. But so I'm Mi'kmaq from the Wabanaki Confederacy, eastern side of Canada, and I've been playing lacrosse my entire life, and currently in my last year of high school at the Hill Academy, and I'll be going to the States next year to play lacrosse at Bellarmine University. And again, I'm very happy for everyone that you were able to make it, and I look forward to this discussion. So thank you. Well, Alan.
Great. Devin?
I'm Devin Buckshot. I'm from the Onondaga Nation, which is close by to Syracuse. I'm currently a student at High Point University, which is North Carolina. I was a member of the U19 team, Iroquois team that played in BC, and currently looking to try out for the men's.
Great, thank you. Sonny?
How you doing? My name is Sonny Campbell, and I'm originally from Galway in the west of Ireland. I've been living up in Dublin for the last few years, and this is where I've kind of learned to play lacrosse. And a little bit different to these guys. It's not a sport that I really grew up with. I grew up playing, but it's something I started later in life when I was in university. And so I've been playing on the Irish national team since 2014, I believe, Denver. It's been an amazing experience for me. I started my lacrosse journey only in 2010. It's a while ago now, but it was something that if I had a chance to play earlier, it would have been amazing.
Great. Thanks a lot, Sonny. So I want to let people know as well, anybody attending the session, that you can submit questions, and towards the end we'll make sure that we make some time to answer any questions that people have. But also, really by way of introduction, I'm aware that the attendees at this session may not necessarily be from within the lacrosse community. Most of us are very used to talking within the international lacrosse community, and we know all the relevant issues there are. And people are very aware of the Iroquois Nationals, the importance that they have in the game of lacrosse and in the international lacrosse community. And I hope the two guys here will forgive me, but for those who aren't familiar with lacrosse, I usually say that the Iroquois Nationals are to lacrosse what Brazil are to soccer. They may not always win every single game, but they play the most beautiful version of the sport. So that's a way I often describe it to people not that familiar with the connection. And really, one of the reasons why this conversation has come about is there's a multi-event being held in Birmingham, Alabama in 2022 called the World Games. And this event is a kind of staging area for the Olympics. So inclusion of lacrosse in the Olympics is an important component of the kind of strategic plan of World Lacrosse, which is the international governing body. But ever since that has been a component of the World Lacrosse Strategic Plan, the question amongst the lacrosse community is, what does that mean for the Iroquois Nationals, who aren't fully recognized by the International Olympic Committee? And so there were always questions that if lacrosse does get in the Olympics, where does that leave the Iroquois Nationals? So this issue arose in relation to the World Games in Birmingham, Alabama, where only 8 teams were being invited to participate. And in terms of international rankings, the Iroquois Nationals ranked well above Ireland. They were 3rd in the world in the men's 2018 World Championship in Israel. And so they would have been entitled to an invitation to the event, but they didn't get one. And I think the reason is because there was that assumption that Olympic eligibility rules would apply. Very fortunately, the international lacrosse community responded, and I think Aidan in particular had a key role in that, in raising this issue. And eventually, through discussion with Games Association and with World Lacrosse and with the Iroquois Nationals, it was agreed that they could be accommodated in the event, that they should be accommodated in the event. But that meant, there were only 8 teams invited. So if the Iroquois take up the spot in the event, which is rightfully theirs, a team would have to miss out. Another team would have to miss out. And it really fell to us because we were the lowest ranked team. So it makes sense to make room for the Iroquois that we voluntarily vacated our spot in the event. And we were very deliberate in using that language because the long and short of it is, if we knew when the invites were issued, what we know now, we would never have got an invite, and the Iroquois would have rightfully got an invite. So we felt that was the right way to do it. So we're very pleased at that outcome. So, again, for people who aren't that familiar with the developments in international lacrosse who may be on this webinar, that's a bit of background about where this link between Ireland and the Iroquois Nationals, really the latest step in that connection. So we're really delighted to be able to keep the conversation going and to continue to collaborate with the Iroquois Nationals. So that's just by way of background to recent events. But I'd like to kind of hand over to Aidan in the first instance to provide a more depth description of the history of the game of lacrosse itself and what it means for Indigenous people.
Yeah, thank you. So for those of you who don't know about the sport of lacrosse, it's been played through generations of our people, and it's the oldest team sport on the continent of North America. It's been played for over 1,000 years. So when we were gifted the game over 1,000 years ago, it wasn't a typical sport, right? It was gifted to us as a game of medicine and healing. So when I say that it was gifted in that way, it was to heal the people who were sick. and to settle, make peace amongst different nations of the Mohawk or the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, which include the Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, Oneida, and the Tuscarora nations. So the game wasn't always played the way it is now. So way back when, there were no referees. There was nothing like that. There was no really rules in that sense. And the sticks were made from wood from the birch tree. We had the netting was made from the sinew of a deer, and everyone played with purpose. And it was truly a beautiful game of healing and medicine. Excuse me. That kind of changed when colonization came into Canada and presented itself as an issue. The French came in and they gave it the nickname of lacrosse because they thought the sticks resembled the little cross of the bishops there, so they called it Lacrosse. And before we were known as, the Haudenosaunee people were known as the Haudenosaunee people, and they were given the name as the Iroquois by the French. So that's what they're known as. I guess what we're known as today with the Iroquois Nationals and whatnot. But the first game of lacrosse, colonized, I guess you could say, it was first played in Montreal in Canada, and there's a different game from the game we had in our teachings and throughout our generation. And 200 years later, that was in the mid 1600s, and then 200 years later, Canada officially made it their national sport, or as well as hockey. But it really took away from how the game's played and the purpose behind it. So that kind of brings us to where we are now. And I just want to say the Haudenosaunee people, it is their game, and it was gifted to everyone. And so I think, touching back to your topic earlier with the exclusion in the World Games, I think it's like saying to someone, you made this game, but we're going to take it and it's ours now, and you can't participate in it. And I think it's just not right. So it's great. I'm very grateful for everything has done, pulling out of World Games. But I think there's still a lot of progress to be made, right? I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but when it comes to the Olympics, I think you mentioned it earlier, the eligibility. I think there's to figure out, but we're definitely on the way to getting there. But that's a brief summary.
Okay, great. Thanks for that background, Aidan. And the medicine game as it's played today. So those of us in the international community have heard that terminology used frequently. Is it that like every game that's played is a medicine game? Are particular medicine games played for particular purposes? Can you give some more insight into that?
Yeah, so I think every time we play lacrosse, it's the medicine game in itself. For me personally, when I play this sport, I don't play just for the sake of playing. I'm playing for someone or for something. And I truly believe I find healing in the game. Every hardship I've ever faced in my life has gone away, and I've been able to face it, any piece of adversity, anything through lacrosse. So it's a truly strong game, and I think a lot of that medicine comes from the power of the stick. So as I mentioned earlier, it is made of the hickory tree. So that kind of represents all the plant life, and then with the sinew of the deer, representing all the animals and all the four-legged beings and whatnot. So I think the power comes from that stick from a young age. As the Haudenosaunee lacrosse player, you're given your stick and to carry with you, almost like a sacred bundle, right? And the power that's behind that stick is crazy, and you're not meant to disrespect it, and you have it in your hands all the time. So, and I think it's funny, the way you mentioned, you gave the Brazil soccer analogy. In terms of lacrosse, I don't think there's a single nation who plays the way the Iroquois do. Just in terms of creativity, having the stick in your hand from a young age, you're able to do things, and just playing around with it. So before I touch on that, I just want to give a little example. So in Canada, for example, if you walk to any local community that's not an Indigenous community, every kid's growing up playing hockey. And for that reason, Canada has some of the best hockey players in the world. Whereas you go to any Indigenous community in Canada, that's Haudenosaunee at least, you'll see 3-year-olds, walking around on the street with lacrosse sticks and shooting in their backyard as opposed to other sports. So I think just having that medicine and that power with your stick and that being a part of your bundle and a part of you, really allows for a different way of play. But to go back to the original question in terms of healing, every game of lacrosse is a game of healing, and it's always played for a purpose and played for someone, played for the creator. So that's all. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that, Aidan. And I touch on something else that you mentioned about the stick. So the traditional stick is a wooden stick, and I have a few in my collection, and really, any true lacrosse player will have one or two at least in their collection. And I've heard, the more modern sticks, are metal and plastic, and I've heard some native peoples refer to them as Tupperware. I always like that terminology that's used, that they really believe strongly that the game should really be played with the traditional wooden stick and not these modern versions of Tupperware. And also that, true lacrosse enthusiasts are very anxious to get their hands on these traditional sticks. But the message I've come across is that they don't belong up on the wall. They're not decorations. They should be played with. Can you expound on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, when you're gifted your stick, it becomes a part of you, and it becomes part of your spirit. And the way we look at it is every stick has its own spirit. And you can't. It's like carrying around a sacred eagle feather or something. You can't disrespect that spirit. So it just becomes a part of you, and it's not to. For example, if you have a wooden stick made for you, you don't just throw it on the wall or throw it in the garage when you're done a lacrosse practice or something. No, you cherish that stick and you keep it in great condition, and you really, I guess just cherish it is the only word I can think of, and it's just becomes a part of you, and it's just so sacred, and it's a beautiful thing. The lacrosse stick, and they take a while to make, too. They don't just it's not like a factory made thing. Every Indigenous stick is hand carved, and there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that, and putting the spirit into that stick, so it becomes a part of you, and you pass away with it too. When you're buried, you have your lacrosse stick, so it's that's that.
Great. Thanks for that, Aidan. And to touch on something else you mentioned, and really to draw Devin into the conversation now as well. You had mentioned, the effect of colonization, that the Canadian settlers took the game and turned it into something that it wasn't really meant to be. And you also mentioned, Devin, you're about to start at university. You're just finishing high school. Now, Devin is at university, at High Point University in North Carolina, and you're now playing the sport, NCAA. I'm always using comparisons, as I mentioned, about Brazil soccer, like NCAA, which is the college level lacrosse in the US. It's really high profile, very intense. Young players are all competing to go and play at university. It's almost, I would say, on a par with NCAA basketball in terms of its level of competition and popularity and things like that. So could I ask you, Devin, how do you feel, coming from, Onondaga and then playing at the university? Do you feel that there's a recognition at that NCAA level of the roots of the game?
I feel I feel like they have a lot of respect towards us, and really appreciate what we have to offer for the game. They dive deep into giving us the opportunity to be better. Also, just given the opportunity to be in college is also a big thing, to be away from the reservation. And lose my thought.
So I don't know if you caught that, Devin, but I just asked, are there other native players at High Point, or are you the only one there?
There's another Native American here, but he's not a full-blooded Native American. Like, he gets a little scholarship money here. His dad's Native American, but the way I go about it, it goes by your mother. So, like, your bloodline's passed down through your mother. So, like, that's mother and father. So that's how you get to be like the full Native American.
Okay. And in your experience playing at High Point, you know, you mentioned that you feel there's a lot of respect from the game. Do you find that's the case on the field too, or like, do you think your fellow players equally, you know, respect the role of lacrosse in Native communities?
Yeah, I feel like they do. They, like, on the field, I'm given a little more freedom to do like the nice plays, and I don't try to make everything look too flashy, but to me, something not being flashy might come off to somebody else as being flashy. But I really look at it like that. It's like a natural development that I came over throughout the years, just playing so much.
Very good. And we were talking earlier about whether you had ever faced Ireland on the field, and you mentioned you were part of the Iroquois under-19 team that played in the Men's World U19 Championship, which was in 2016 in BC on the west coast of Canada. Do you have any memories of coming up against Ireland? I know you guys beat us, but have you any recollection of that?
Yeah, I do. I have a few memories. It was like a little time back, but like these memories stick around. I remember just from watching like a replay of the game, one of the announcers saying something about one of my shots. He like compared it to my last name of it coming out as like a buckshot, like a shotgun shell, and that kind of stuck with me.
In a positive way? Were you happy with that?
Yeah. Like,
yeah, I suspect our goalies probably weren't so happy, but thanks for that, Devin. So, you know, maybe if I can move on to Sonny as well, and maybe talk a little bit. You know, you guys talked about your kind of spiritual connection with the game, that you've been growing up playing with it. Whereas in his introduction, Sonny mentioned, you know, he only started playing, I think it was around 2010. So, you know, a real latecomer to the sport. So maybe, Sonny, do you want to talk about how early on in your experience of the sport did you come to understand that connection, that cultural connection with the Iroquois Nationals?
Of the Iroquois Nationals when they talk about the game. You know, I think I was quite lucky in that the person who initially came to Galway and brought lacrosse to Galway, his name was Ryan Doran, and he was from Syracuse originally. And because of that, he played with a lot of the Onondaga Iroquois there. He played on the reservation with a lot of them, so he kind of grew up playing with the Indigenous people, and he knew what it meant to them and what the real meaning behind the game was. And he, you know, it was one of the first things that he kind of passed on to us, was the importance of those parts of it, and where the game originated from. You know, when I started and I picked up a stick for the first time, it was basically at like an open sports day at the beginning of the year in college, where you could go and try out any sports, and they had, you know, tables all over. And yeah, there was just a table there for lacrosse, and I went and picked up a stick with two of my friends in college, and you know, we asked, what's this game? None of us had ever seen it before, and you know, there's a few guys who'd come down from Dublin to kind of help out and try and get some recruitment, and so, you know, we ended up spending 2 or 3 hours. I think we skipped a couple of lectures. We just stood around in the hall, like throwing the ball back and forth all day, and you know, it was. I remember the first time picking up a lacrosse stick and trying to pass the ball, and you know, it's such a strange. It's just different to other sports that I played before. You know, the feel of the ball and like how to throw it, and catch it, and everything it was a weird experience. But for whatever reason, you know, we stood around for a few hours that day, just passing the ball back and forth, running after it when we dropped it, and got really, really into it. So, you know, we kind of signed up, and I don't know if it was that evening or the next evening when the first training session was on. We went up to Carr Village, which is the pitches up near NUIG in Galway, where I started playing. And yeah, it stuck from there for whatever reason, you know. We played our very first game of lacrosse for NUIG. We didn't have jerseys or pennies or anything, and we borrowed hurling jerseys from the NUIG hurling team to put on. And so there's still a photo somewhere of us stood around with like the helmets, pads, and sticks, and in the hurling jersey, which is yeah, it's still one of my favorite photos.
Very good. And, you know, we were also talking, Sonny, that you and I were actually teammates on an Irish team that played in a World Indoor Championship in 2015, which was held on the Onondaga Reservation, which is near Syracuse, New York. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, that was a really incredible one. You know, getting to go onto the reservation and to see, you know, the crowds that came out, and the local team, and they had just finished building a new arena there. I think kind of specifically for the event, but also for the area, and it was amazing to see. You know, everything felt a bit more. It just felt a bit more, I suppose. You know, between the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony. Seeing how much it meant to the people of the Onondaga Reservation, and you know, they were so welcoming to us when we got there. You know, we showed up, and we were, you know, given every welcome. Every team had a local native who was there as their kind of guide through the tournament, and around the areas, who, you know, told us of the history and the different aspects of the sport and why it was, you know, meaningful to them, and to get to be a part of that was really something special. I remember there's like a little passport office they had there that you know, every team, I think, got to go down to and get their passport stamped by, you know, for entering the Onondaga Reservation onto their territory, and it's something that, you know, I've since got a new passport, but I still have that one kept because, you know, of all the places I've traveled, I think that one was the most meaningful, the most memorable, for sure.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned it, because one of my very strong memories from that event was everybody having the chance to go and into the passport office and have the passport stamped with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy stamp. And I think for the benefit of the audience, like, that was particularly significant because in 2010, the men's world championship was taking place in Manchester in England, and the Iroquois Nationals team, which was a particularly strong team, I would say, that year, they were prevented from traveling. And they ended up not being able to take part in the 2010 World Championship because of issues around their Haudenosaunee passports, that they weren't recognized. I don't remember the precise detail, but it was something like, at first the UK wouldn't let them in to come and participate because they weren't certain that they'd be allowed back into North America after the event. And then there was some very high level, I believe Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State at the time, and she was involved. But the long and short of it was, it wasn't possible, and it didn't happen. And the Iroquois team got stranded, I think it was, in New York, and wasn't able to participate in that event. And to me, that was, that really hit hard, like that. Here we have one of the best teams in the world, and they've been excluded from this event because of issues around passports and sovereignty. So, when this 2022 World Games happened, it really had echoes of that. So I wonder if I could ask Aidan again, do you have any recollection of that situation in 2010, or any familiarity with it?
Sorry. Yeah. So at the time, I was about 8 years old. So, in a current state, no. But I do know about the situation, and it's pretty similar to like what's going on, or I guess what was going on a few months ago with the exclusion in the World Games in 2022. But it's not just in lacrosse we see this. I think, especially, I'll speak more about it to Canada because that's, what I know, that's where I'm from. But, we see a lot of, problems systemically with, the recognition of Indigenous people, just overall. And I think it was obviously apparent there in those two situations for lacrosse. But, my hope for the future is that, we're recognized as a sovereign nation, as the oldest nation in North America. I think it's only right, and to have the game taken away from you, our healing game, our medicine game, the creator's game, to have that taken away from us, it hits a little deep for me. It hurts. My hope though is that we can sort this out, get the Haudenosaunee Confederacy recognized as a sovereign nation, so that when the Olympics roll around in, I believe, 2028, we can be a part of the lacrosse trials in that event as well, and not just the World Games. So I think the World Games is a good stepping stone, but there's still a lot of progress to be made for the future and the future of the Iroquois Nationals.
And about that World Games event, so we all were part of some of the publicity that was surrounding that, but can you clarify? So a lot of this was really happened with the launch of a change.org campaign. And do I understand correctly, you were the person who set that up?
Yeah. So, yeah.
And you did it just on your own initiative, or?
Yeah. So, how that actually came into fruition there was, I was on the website Inside Lacrosse, which is like a lacrosse news source thing, and I saw this article that explained the exclusion of the Iroquois Nationals men's team in the 22 World Games. And I kind of sat there for a second, and I was like, hey, if I'm a member of their U21 team, and I haven't heard about this is news to me. I can't even imagine what the general public or the lacrosse community in general, what they think about it, if they even know, right? So, I just originally started that petition, of the Nationals and the World Games, just to make it like a known issue. And I was maybe, expecting at most 1,000 or 2,000 signatures, but I believe last time I checked, it hit over 55,000. And I think it's great because it shows how tightly knit the lacrosse community is. And I know Devin mentioned earlier with the acknowledgement of the heritage behind the game in the NCAA. And I think the lacrosse community has come a long way. I think people out there are willing to acknowledge that it's our game. It's, you know, it's the creator's game, the game of healing. Like, it's not just, you know, a normal game to us, right? So, yeah, I think the lacrosse community has come a long way, and they're a big part of what, you know, everyone who signed that petition. It's a big part of the inclusion of the Iroquois Nationals, and I think, you know, the community did a good job coming together, you know, to make what's happened happen. And I think it's nice to see, especially, you know, with the year we've had, and it'll be good to see, you know, going into the future. But, yeah.
And Devin, how about from your point of view? How did you feel, you know, when you heard that the Iroquois were being excluded, and what did you think about it?
At the time, I was probably 11, maybe 12 years old, and I didn't really believe it was happening at first because people who were on that team and the people who were helped setting it up. And when they weren't allowed and they ended up being stuck in New York, I think it was about a week, they were still there. And we're like, so are they going to be allowed to go, or what's happening? And we're like still trying to figure out what's happening with it. And they ended up just having to come back home, and like that, it was like a big letdown almost, because we knew that that team was very strong and they were going to have a good run ahead of them. But not being able to go put them on like a big setback. But you just got to keep looking forward and waiting for the next one.
And what would it mean to you, Devin, you know, if you could play in the Olympics for the Iroquois Nationals? Do you think the Olympics is important for the sport of lacrosse?
That would be really huge, actually, like, because that's, again, the Olympics and the whole world is watching at that point. But like with the rules they got for it, I don't support those rules 100%. Like, they should keep it how it is and how the game was meant to be played. But if we are given the chance to be on that stage or level of like entertainment level, that'd be really big for the game as growing the sport.
Yeah. So for the benefit of audience members, so World Lacrosse created a new version of the sport. So there's already two versions. There's field and there's box. Field is 10-a-side on a grass pitch about the size of a soccer pitch. Box is 6-on-6 in a converted ice hockey rink. And with turf on it. So that's been a common form of the sport. But to appeal to Olympic audiences, World Lacrosse created brand new rules for a third version, which is 6v6. And it's almost like a hybrid between the field version and the box version. And it's something similar that rugby has done. So rugby, for example, adapted a new version of the sport to make it attractive in the Olympics. I believe basketball are doing the same. So basketball, most people know, is 5-on-5, but I think they're looking at a 3v3 version that would be part of the Olympic sport. So I hear what you're saying, Devin, that this is just a case of messing with the original game again. But that's the drawback. But the benefit, as you pointed out, is it could bring new exposure to the sport. So coming back to this issue of sovereignty, I think is important, and passports and things like that. And I'm struck that there's some cities with Ireland. So like we live on an island. Technically, there's two different countries, but there's no real border. You can drive from one to the other. And I know there's a number of reservations that similarly straddle the border between Canada and the US. So this sense of territorial sovereignty is something, there's an ambiguity around Iroquois sovereignty and Haudenosaunee sovereignty that I think Irish people can understand to a certain extent because we similarly have a little bit of ambiguity about sovereignty and exactly what constitutes part of the Irish nation. And one of the things that is of particular relevance to the Irish lacrosse program is, we draw players from all over the world, essentially. We have players who were born and raised in Ireland, like Sonny is a great example, who play for our national team, but we also have people born and raised in the UK and Canada, in the USA, who are eligible for Irish passports. So, Devin, you mentioned about eligibility for the Iroquois Nationals coming through the mother's bloodline. In Ireland, anybody who has a parent or grandparent born on the island of Ireland, so that includes Northern Ireland, is eligible for an Irish passport. And so we have a lot of these individuals that play for our national teams, our men's team, our women's team. And we actually started using this slogan, Ijanta Akela, a number of years ago, which is Together as One, which also became a big slogan as part of what was happening with the Iroquois and the World Games. And we tried to use that slogan to show, like, it doesn't matter if you grew up in New York, if you grew up in Toronto, if you grew up in London, or you grew up in Dublin. We're all together as one playing for the Irish national team, and people have that passport, an Irish passport. So, you guys have issue with your passport. We have a passport, but we still have issues because, a lot of people in the international lacrosse community think, they shouldn't play for Ireland because they weren't born and raised there. So, Sonny, I'd like to put that to you as a long-time national team player. Can you talk a little bit about your opinion, and feel free to express your opinion on what you think about that connection between, Irish people here and outside of Ireland?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just to kind of clarify. So I was born in the UK, but I moved to Galway when I was about 1, and I've grew up here pretty much ever since. And so I fully consider myself entirely Irish, and I am. This is where I've lived. This is where I've grown up. But there are people who, as you mentioned, have parents, have grandparents who are from Ireland, and may have emigrated at any point in time in history. And a lot of people feel a really strong connection with Ireland through their family. Particularly around North America. There's a huge connection there, and you see it very strongly with stuff like St. Patrick's Day. Even if they call it St. Patty's Day instead of St. Paddy's Day, they they everything is green. They have the Shamrock Shake. Is there a river in Chicago or something that they turn green on Paddy's Day? There's a huge connection with the Irish people abroad, that people love to look back at their heritage and where they came from, and through that, because like lacrosse is a small sport for most of the world, and it's still very much a growing sport. A lot of people don't know that it exists in Ireland. And when they find out that there is an Irish national team who play lacrosse, these people who have Irish connections want to come and play. They want to try out. It's part of their culture. It's part of their heritage. They may have grown up playing it in the States or Canada, and they want to come back and kind of represent the country that is part of their history. There's often a kind of contention, I guess, amongst the lacrosse community around, people want the national teams to be made up of kind of homegrown players, right? To grow the game within the country, because the Americans who grew up playing the game, inevitably are the stronger players. You know, they would have played from a young age. They could have played through primary school, through secondary school, through university, and so they're naturally, you know, the players who would be strongest. And when they come over, you know, for teams, it can often feel like they're playing against, you know, a team of Americans as opposed to a team of Irish. And you know, we very much are on the same level of eligibility as every other sport in Ireland, right? You know, it's about your passport, it's about the parent who was born here, and kind of tying back into that Olympic eligibility discussion is, you know, those are the eligibility requirements for somebody to represent Ireland at the Olympics: is a parent or grandparent and an Irish passport. So, you know, historically for the Irish national team, what we've said is that 51% should be Irish-based players. They should be, you know, guys who are here, who are playing in Ireland, who are, you know, coaching, helping out, we're helping to grow the game. You know, they'll be the players who kind of are, you know, training here and working with the Irish community in Ireland. So a panel, for those who don't know, a panel of players that goes to something like the World Games would be or the World Championships, let's say, for the tennis version would be a panel of 23 players. And so 12 of them are Irish-based players and 11 are from anywhere in the world. And so, you know, you do often see lots of North Americans who are coming over to play, but it's not limited to North Americans either. You know, we've had guys from the UK come over, try out and play, and come and play for the team as those in those, you know, 11 outside of Ireland spots, because, you know, similarly there's a huge Irish contingency over there who similarly feel a very strong connection with Ireland and want to be part of the national team here and to represent, you know, their history and their culture and their heritage. You know, so yeah, as I mentioned, there oftentimes is there is contention amongst some of the lacrosse communities at the World Championships around the number of North Americans who end up playing on some of these teams, because, you know, for the opponents who maybe, you know, certain teams have just strict criteria that you must be playing lacrosse in the country to participate in the national team. And to those guys, you know, it feel like a very uphill battle, because some of the stronger players who come in from North America make it a much harder game. But, you know, they're just as much a part of Irish history, Irish culture, and Irish heritage as anyone else. So, you know, who are we to say that they shouldn't be allowed to be part of the Irish national team and to be able to represent their history and their heritage?
That's great. Thank you, Sonny. That was, I mean, absolutely comprehensive review of the issue. And I think, you know, the issue doesn't just relate to sport. You know, some people might be aware there's a discourse in Ireland now about possibly, you know, a referendum to give Irish citizens abroad the opportunity to vote for the president of Ireland. So, you know, and everything that we saw yesterday around St. Patrick's Day is actually all about embracing the international Irish community, not just keeping the holiday to ourselves. So in a way, almost similar to how the Iroquois treat the game of lacrosse. You know, they don't just keep it to themselves. It's something to be celebrated by everybody, that everybody can share in that. So that's brilliant, Sonny. Thank you. So I think we have some questions from the audience members, which we're happy to address. But I'm not sure if I missed it, but when was lacrosse introduced to Ireland? I was aware that it was a common sport. So actually, yeah, Sonny's smiling because he knows if let loose, I could probably talk about this for a couple of hours. So, and it connects back to some of what Aidan has talked about, the role of colonialism and that. So lacrosse was played in Ireland in the late 1800s. In fact, the first team in Ireland was established in Newtownards, which is right outside Belfast, in 1872. And so it was men's lacrosse. At its peak, there were 13 men's teams playing on the island of Ireland. Most of those were mainly around Northern Ireland. And Aidan mentioned the kind of rule book, the codification of the rules. That was undertaken by a Canadian dentist from Montreal named William George Beers. And he codified the rules of lacrosse. And he wrote a book actually called Lacrosse, the National Game of Canada. And in the introduction in that book, he recalls meeting a Canadian, an Irish-Canadian politician named Thomas D'Arcy McGee on a train in Montreal. And William George Beers had some sticks with him, and Thomas D'Arcy McGee remarked at how similar it looked to hurling. We'll hear from other speakers in this Landspeak event about hurling and Gaelic games. So there was lacrosse in Ireland, in men's lacrosse, in the late 1870s, and then even within that period, I would note there was an Irish national team. And in 1886, the Irish men's national team traveled to North America and played exhibition games all throughout North America over like a 3-month period. And incredibly, there's a scrapbook of that trip in 1886, which is held in the National Library of Ireland in Dublin. And actually, one of the things we're thinking about doing is getting a hold of that scrapbook and bringing it to Limerick next summer for the men's U21 World Championship and World Festival, so we can put it on display and people can actually see it, because it's really an amazing resource. Incredible that they had the presence of mind to record all the details and even to put them into the National Library of Ireland, where it would be properly taken care of. So, so men's lacrosse then died out around 1903. I haven't quite been able to put my finger on why, but I think it has to do with the fact that, there were a lot of other, organized sports that emerged around the turn of the century. Rugby, soccer, Gaelic games, hurling, and Gaelic football. So there was competition for field space, for players and all that sort of thing. So men's lacrosse died out in 1903, and then women's lacrosse emerged around 1920. And women's lacrosse was played in Ireland from 1920 all the way up to 1970. And then it died out in 1970. Then men's lacrosse re-emerged in 2001. And then women's lacrosse re-emerged in 2005, and then we've sort of had continuous development since that time. But interestingly, and a question I'd like to put to Aidan and to Devin is around gender. So I've given you an overview of the history of the game here. When I first got involved in kind of re-establishing lacrosse in Ireland, mainly around 2004, the kind of feeling that people had here is, it's a girls' sport, because most people who were still alive had experience of only women's lacrosse in Ireland from 1920 to 1970. So there's this strange I'll call it prejudice, but in the most neutral way of using that term, that lacrosse was a girls' sport because that's what people knew it as. Can you guys, maybe Aidan, can you talk about the gender aspect and the emergence of the Haudenosaunee women's team?
Yeah, so I think, in cultural history, being a lacrosse player, it means you're a warrior. And looking at the women's team, there's so many strong women on that team, strong warriors, and I think they're kind of following par with the men's team, right? They're very successful at the world level, and they're one of the strongest teams in the world. I'm not fortunate enough to have gotten an opportunity to see them play, but from what I can tell, they play a very good brand of ball, and they dominate on a global scale. So yeah.
And Devin, are there any Haudenosaunee women's players from Onondaga that you know of?
There's a few that I know. The rest of a lot of them are all scattered around throughout different nations. But like the ones I know of, they succeed at the highest levels they can. A lot of them all went on to play in college and did very well with wherever they were.
And in terms of that involvement at the college level, Devin, do you guys talk to each other? Like, say, for someone like Aidan, who's about to enter into that NCAA experience, do you guys talk to each other about preparing for that, both including the men and the women, for being involved with the sport at that level?
I mean, you can. It's just necessarily like if you were to reach out to me asking for any information, I'm glad to ask for anything he wants to know. But like, I don't necessarily go out of my way to be like, hey, like this is what you got to do, and like if you want it, just ask. I won't hold back.
And coming back to this question about the things that Sonny highlighted about North Americans playing for other teams, given, Devin, that you have experience of playing at a world championship, does that what Sonny described, about other teams talking about, how many North Americans do you have on your team? Do you have any recollection of that or any experience of that? Were you aware that that's an issue with a lot of teams?
I wasn't like completely sure about it, but I knew that there was other players, like a few Americans. Like one, for example, that I know of is Stephen Keel playing on the box team there. I think there was a few others at the time, but like I didn't think of it as an issue at all. It's like that's where you're from. That's who you should be playing for. Like if that's what your culture is, then go for it.
And Aidan, do you have any view on that? Were you aware of that issue at kind of international lacrosse level about North Americans, so-called, being on the rosters for other national teams?
Yeah, I mean, you always hear about it. Like I have a few buddies. One guy played for Poland. One guy for Israel. But I know a bunch of Americans. Play for Canada, and vice versa. So I think. The way I look at it, I agree with Devin. If it's part of your identity, you should be afforded the right to play for that team. And at the end of the day, I don't personally see anything wrong with it because all it's doing, it's increasing the caliber of play. It's increasing, the game itself, the energy, the speed, the pace, maybe the skill in some cases. So I don't think there's really a negative thing to it. I think, you just, whoever you are, your identity, play for that team. So yeah.
Great. And sort of the next sort of topic I'd like to cover with you all is really about kind of like international collaboration and cooperation, partnership, alliance, solidarity, and how on the one hand, we meet each other on the field and, we all want to win. We're athletes want to win, coaches want to win. That's what their aim is. But off the field, how important is it from an Iroquois Nationals point of view to make connections with other countries, just like, we've developed a relationship with yourselves as Ireland Lacrosse. You might have seen, we just announced yesterday on St. Patrick's Day 2 event ambassadors for the men's tournament in Limerick. Grant Ament, who plays in the PLL with the Archers, and Lyle Thompson also wearing a Limerick GA jersey on Instagram, which we sent to him, which we were very pleased about. What does it mean to you guys to have those kinds of collaborations?
Yeah, I guess I can go first here. So, I think, one thing, as much as I know about the Irish, like Indigenous Irish culture, from what I know, which is very limited, it's very similar to, Indigenous North American culture. So, with that being said, I think anytime you have a bunch of countries and nations, and not just Ireland and the Haudenosaunee Nation alone, I'm talking in general, it's very cool when you have all these different cultures, backgrounds, countries all in the same place for an event, especially when it's the game of healing of lacrosse. I think the relations that people make are great, and people make new friends. They learn every culture that's in attendance, which is great. And I think all it can do is really just promote the game of lacrosse. So, like you said earlier, it's more predominantly found in North America. But I think when we have all these nations coming together, it just spreads the game. And I think, I don't know a single lacrosse player or person involved within the sport. If you ask them who, they would answer, yeah, I don't want the game to grow. And I don't want it to be played around the world. So I think what these meetings and what these big groups and relations between countries, what it really does is it solidifies the role of the sport, and it brings people together, and it's a big community feel, kind of like the original purpose behind the medicine game. So I think it's a beautiful thing, for sure.
And if I understand correctly, both of you guys, Aidan and Devin, were you in line to play for the Iroquois U19 team in the Limerick tournament, which was supposed to happen last summer?
So I know I was. Devin, I think you're a little old, but
yeah, I was just saying, right? I wasn't old for that.
Okay, so Aidan, then, you were in line to compete for the Iroquois Nationals in that tournament in Limerick.
Yes, correct. I was, and I was pretty disappointed with the outcome of obviously it getting canceled. But I mean, we're in a pandemic, and obviously that takes priority. It's unfortunate, but I'm excited for when I believe it got moved to the summer of 22. So it should be a great time. And yeah.
Yeah, so it'll take place now from the 10th to the 20th of August, 2022, at the same venue, the University of Limerick, which is a fantastic venue. Great facilities, fields there, accommodation there. It's all in the same place. And one of the things that have emerged out of the situation with the World Games, and in talking to some of the Iroquois Nationals leadership, is, very commonly during a World Championship event, there's like a festival tournament, which is like a fun kind of club team tournament that's really intended to increase the number of people involved in the event. And, we're really keen to have as many Indigenous teams, boys and girls, youth and adult, come over and play in the World Festival, so that we can kind of build on that relationship that we've developed and celebrate it while we can all be together in Ireland, hopefully, once the pandemic sort of dissipates. So, we're looking forward to ensuring that the Iroquois will be able to travel to that event, that there won't be similar issues that we had in the instance of Manchester in 2010, where the team couldn't travel. So, we reached out to the previous Irish ambassador to Canada, who's now changed, and we're very fortunate that later on today there'll be a session from the new Irish ambassador to Canada, and we hope we can pick up the issue with him to make sure that the native teams that are traveling to Limerick, both for the World Championship event but also for the World Festival, will be able to travel on those Haudenosaunee passports. So can you guys actually tell us about what's the current status of those passports? Are they internationally recognized? Is there a process in place for getting those recognized?
Devin, maybe if you want to touch on that, go ahead.
I'm not really sure. Like as of now, I don't think they are internationally recognized, but I don't see what's holding them back from not being internationally recognized. Like it's just as valid as anybody else's passport.
Very good. Great. Is there anything else that you guys want to cover, or anything you feel we've missed in terms of really relaying to the audience what the game is about? Its importance to Haudenosaunee culture, and what it means to you guys.
I guess.
Yeah, sure. So I mean,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
Maybe.
go ahead. Okay.
Sure. No, I was just saying. I think there's a delay. You go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. There's a little bit of a delay. Canada and Ireland, a little far apart, but I just want to reiterate, like, the game, it's more than just, a sport and a game. It's the medicine game. It's made for healing. So, I encourage everyone, watching this, when you're playing, you're not just playing for the sake of playing, like, to win, right? You're playing with a purpose. You're playing for someone. Because I think when you look at the fundamental values of the game, it's a beautiful thing. And I think that's what we need to remember in general when the game is being played nowadays is kind of honor the original form of the game and then the importance behind the meanings of the teachings that come with the game. So
great. Thanks, Aidan. So, Sonny?
I just want to kind of echo some of the sentiment that was discussed around the community of lacrosse. There's, worldwide, it's incredible to kind of experience that sense of community when you go anywhere in the world. I know I've made lifelong friends and people who have had a huge impact on my life through the game of lacrosse. And it has always felt different to me to other sports. I'm not sure why. It's I guess it's part of the history of lacrosse and it being a medicine game and the real meaning behind it as opposed to just a sport. But I know I've been lucky enough to travel all over, and I know anywhere I go in the world, I can find a lacrosse team, a lacrosse player over there, and immediately have that sense of community and that sense of friendship or brotherhood with a team that I don't know. I just haven't experienced playing other sports. It's kind of been a big part of my life for the last 10 years, and I'm incredibly grateful for it, and haven't been lucky enough to find it when I did. And to kind of again echo the sentiment around what happened in 2010 in Manchester. I was over there playing in the festival tournament that you were talking about going on side in Limerick. And I remember everybody talking about it. It was the only thing that really anybody was talking about over there was how the Iroquois Nationals weren't able to go, and they're it's a bit of a slap in the face to the people who kind of gave this game to the world, who gave this to us for us to be going there without them, to say they're not able to play in this thing, or they're not eligible because of X or Y. For one of the best teams in the world, for the team that everybody wants to play against or to see play, they always have the busiest games for people to go and watch, because, as the guys mentioned, they grew up holding onto the stick. I remember hearing like the people talk about how they'd take the stick to bed with them, and they'd wake up with it, and it was an extension of their arm, an extension of their body, and so for them, seeing them play, it's a different experience to watch, because everybody learns the kind of, you learn from the fundamentals, right? This is how you hold your stick, and then you kind of pass it like this, and you do this thing to shoot and whatever. And for the Iroquois Nationals, it always looked so much more natural, that they did the things that they grew up playing, and they did the things that they grew up learning, and it was just something. As Devin mentioned, they're not playing to be flashy. They're playing how they learn to play. When they're kids, or when they're in their house throwing a ball around. It's a tight space, and you see it particularly in the box game. They just have such like close skills, such quick hands, that is learned over a lifetime of holding a stick and passing a ball with your friends, your family, against a wall. And I know I myself was more than happy for us to vacate that spot for those guys, because we don't have any right to be there if they're not. And similarly with what happened in 2010 with the World Games, I think the entire lacrosse community is behind the Iroquois, and is just as sick as they are of this being a constant battle for them. Every player, every fan, they want to see those guys play. They want to see where the culture came from, where the heritage comes from, and they're such a huge part of the game that it was the least we could do to be able to give back to them.
That's fantastic. And Devin, is there anything you would like to add or highlight, anything we haven't covered?
I don't really have anything right now.
Yeah, and so we promised we'd leave some time for questions. I suppose just before that, from my own point of view, I talked about how I've been involved as a player over about 15 years, and I'm CEO of Ireland Lacrosse since 2009. I actually was involved in re-establishing the women's national team in 2005, and I met my wife through that team, and we have 2 little boys now who I'm already teaching the sport to. And what I often think is, like before I got involved, or just what I've gained from the sport is, I've become like an international athlete. Now, I'm not at a level that, Stephen Keogh is, or even Sonny Campbell is, but, the game has enabled me to become an international athlete, a captain, a leader, a CEO, a father, a husband. I mean, those are the things that I've got from the sport. And those are incredible things in anybody's life, in a man's life. So, that's what I owe to the game of lacrosse. Those just so fundamentally important things to my life and my personality. So, it's those things that kind of drive me to, give people here the opportunity to learn the sport, to learn about the history, and if people can game. If I could give people opportunities to gain from the sport what I've gained from the sport, I mean, it's really, I think it's amazing. So, I think there's a couple of questions. We have, about 10 or so minutes left. There'll be some additional question. So here's one from Patricia Robertson. Says, my three brothers played lacrosse in Canada in the 1970s, and so I watched many games. Have the rules of the game changed much since that decade, since the 70s? I feel a little bit obligated to provide an answer, given that I'm the oldest guy on the panel here. The rules are constantly changing, actually, and that is part of the problem, as Devin pointed out, that a brand new version, the 6v6 version of the sport, has been created to make it more palatable for the Olympics. So that's a significant change there, and I think maybe Devin could talk about some of the more recent changes in the NCAA, like for example, a shot clock. Is that correct, Devin? That's relatively recent, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't remember how long ago they added it, a couple years back, but they added a shot clock to speed up the pace of the game. This is for the field version. And because I remember there was an instance where they were just holding the ball behind the net for like minutes on end, but now like you have to get a shot off. And I know since then they even reduced it the slightest bit, like 10 seconds or so, but that significantly speeds up the game, as you have to get a shot off within, I think 80 seconds? I think so. Yeah, 80 seconds you have to get at least hit the pipe, hit the goalie, or you miss it and it's just a turnover.
And there are changes to the face-off rule? Isn't that correct? They changed the face-off rule?
Yeah, that has been changing so much throughout the past few years on everything. But this year, the biggest one is the way you hold the stick. Because you used to be able to hold it both hands over and like you get a better clamp. But now you have to what is it? It's called neutral grip. This was like motorcycle.
Yeah, so again, for our audience members, the face-off, unusually in lacrosse, after a goal is scored, two players line up and they face off to gain possession. So like if my team scores, the opposite team doesn't automatically get to restart the game. The restart of the game is a face-off, which is like a 50-50 battle for the ball. And actually, am I correct, Aidan, that you're a face-off guy? Is that right?
Yes, yeah, correct. So, if it's funny you mentioned the constant rule change in the face-off. In the NCAA, there hasn't been a single year of rule changes, which is every 2 years, where they haven't tweaked the face-off. And now the way college face-offs are, as Devin was speaking, I think I have a stick. Or as he was saying, it's neutral grip, right? So now you're standing up like this as opposed to that, but you also have to stand up now. You can no longer go on your knee. So it's a lot different. And I think the point behind that is they wanted to make it so that there wasn't as many tie-ups at the face-off. But now what we've seen is, guys are still dominating the same way. A lot more loose balls now, but we have a certain set of face-off rules for the NCAA. Then we have a rule for international lacrosse, which is you're pretty much, you're allowed to hand on the plastic, moto grip, a lot of leaning. You can carry the ball in the back of your stick, which is not legal in the NCAA. And then we also have a different set of rules in our pro leagues, being the NLL, which is box, and then in the PLL, which is the most recent pro lacrosse league, which is field lacrosse. It's different. They have a different way of lining up. A different way of taking the face off, closer wings. So I think until we can kind of come to a consensus and find a mutual, face off ruling for everyone, we're going to keep running into these problems, and we're going to see a new set of rule changes every year or so. But yeah, it's definitely a huge part of the game for sure.
And Sonny is also a face off guy. And so, Sonny, at the international level, the rules have been changing too, right? As Aidan mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. They're changing a bit less frequently than the NCAA. It kind of feels like, but a couple of years after a rule gets cemented in the NCAA, it kind of filters its way through to the international game. And so, yeah, like that, the rules have been changing pretty frequently, even between the field game and the box game. So, in the box game at the last indoor World Games, you couldn't have the ball in the back of your stick anymore, and it had to come out in a certain amount of time. And so they're constantly trying to update it. And I think, as we mentioned, they're just trying to speed up the game, because for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's two guys like down in front of the ball, and the whistle blows, and they basically fight for the ball on the ground, and it can become just a bit of like a push and shoving match between two players, which just kind of slows down the flow of the game, because sometimes it could be 10, 20, 30 seconds. Sometimes it gets tied up in there for extended periods of time. And I think part of growing the game is to make it more exciting, and also more like accessible, and for people to understand what's going on, because for anybody who hasn't seen it before, it can look a bit bizarre, the restart and the way it works. And so getting that flow into the game is, I think, the goal. But yeah, to the point of, I think once we find that sweet spot of, consensus and what is, the best set of face-off rules, over time, it'll settle down.
Great. I think we have another question as well from our attendees that we can address. So what would be the most important takeaway from this discussion today, so that more people can support the Iroquois national teams, so that they are not excluded from any more World Games? Maybe Aidan, do you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, sure. So I think, one important thing to remember, and I can't stress this enough, is, our people were gifted the game by the Creator, and in turn, our people are gifting the game to the world. So, I think I talked about it earlier, but, if you were to, let's say you invented the pencil, and you were to give, or I were to take the pencil from you and be like, yeah, this is mine now. Like, it has nothing to do with you. You can't use this, whatever. That's kind of, in a way, what's going on now, or what has been going on in the past, I should say. So I think it's just important to acknowledge the history of the game more than anything. And, not forget that, it's the Haudenosaunee people's game. And that's the most important thing. It's the Creator's game. So.
And Devin, do you want to add anything to that? Is there any takeaways? What do you, in your opinion, what do you think people can do to help the Iroquois Nationals cause?
I think the biggest thing is coming down to the government, what they say is right, and not being allowed back into a country, because say we do get to Ireland and then they don't let us back into the country, that's on the country for not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, that we can all let our people know, our leaders know that, say from my point of view, the tournament isn't going to be the same. Just like the 2010 event in Manchester wasn't the same without the Iroquois Nationals. And, I'm an event host, and, it's not going to be the same if we can't have the Iroquois Nationals team there. So we're doing everything we can do to try to make that happen, including, I've written to the former Irish ambassador to Canada. I'll have to resend the letter to the new Irish ambassador to Canada to highlight that. And, I think for me, I have, a traditional stick, which I use when I play with my two little boys. And if I go and coach in a school, I bring that stick. And, before I introduce, this is how you catch, this is how you throw, I say, this is where the sport came from, and, you can't expect, young people seeing a brand new sport to, absorb all the history, but if that's the first thing you know about the sport, it sticks in their mind, that this sport is unique. It has a unique history. And so anybody involved in promoting the sport, the first thing they should do in introducing it to new players, and you use the term Aiden, grow the game. That's a big slogan with lacrosse. It's a new sport in a lot of countries, and we're all involved in trying to grow the game. But starting out and making people aware of that unique history, for me, that's important, because that means, when they come to, play against the Iroquois Nationals or understand where you're coming from, they've got that grounding in the history of the game. So to me, that's really important. So I think we're at 5:30 now. It's been a great discussion, an hour and a half. I'm really grateful to you guys, Aidan and Devin and Sonny, for being part of this discussion. I think, probably the biggest value is, like, you guys are athletes, and you're the ones on the field, you're the ones playing the game, and it's really important to get the athlete's voice when it comes to the sport of lacrosse. We don't want administrators or people sitting in offices talking about the game. We want the guys who are playing it every day and who are representing their nation, talking about what it means. I'm really grateful to you guys for taking the time to talk to us all. I'm grateful for everybody who submitted questions to us, and I hope we've done a good job of addressing them. And especially I'm grateful to the Ireland Canada University Foundation for giving us the opportunity to talk about this game that we all love. So thank you all very much, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you guys in Limerick, Aidan in particular, if you're going to be on the team, and Devin, I'm sure we can find a festival team for you to come and play for if you'd like to come over. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Especially, I want to acknowledge Aidan and say, Walalan Aidan. When I'm not living in Dublin, I live on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people in the city of Halifax. So it's great to hear you today and to hear all of you talking about your sport. And I think everyone who attended has learned a lot about it. This format allows you to go into the open session. There's an open session button that you can go in to talk more and to meet people who might be there as we go on the stage with other discussions. And prior to your roundtable, we were going to have a song by the Akwesasne singers to kick things off, and we had a bit of a glitch in our communications. So sincere apologies to the Akwesasne women singers who are with us, and I believe are ready to sing a song or possibly two songs if they can, if they would like. Very, very pleased that you can join us for Landspeak, and we're looking forward to hearing you.
I said, hello, everybody. We'd like you to join us and listen to us for a short time. We're going to share some songs with you today. We're Kundi-Wanahawi. We're from Akwesasne, and we're from the Onondaga Nation of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We had another member. She had to leave earlier. My name is Kahundiso Elizabeth Nantico. This is my sister, Bear Fox, and my daughter, Degwani. And I had another daughter, she left earlier. Bear composes the songs that we're going to share with you today, and I'd let her explain what they are. The first song we're going to do is called Kaya Ninyong. I always like to start out with this song because it helps ease our minds about like what's going on right now. I'd like everyone, while we're singing this song, it's like a healing song, to think of their families. And what we're asking is the four messengers from the other directions to watch over our families so that no harm comes to them. I hope you all like that song, and I hope it brings some skana or peace to your mind. Oh, okay. So the next song we're going to do is a water song, because the water is so precious for us. What we're saying in the song is that Kahne Galunyo means all the types of water, like from the rain, the snow, the dew on the plants. For all the waters, it's so precious. And that we love the water. That's what we're saying in the song. Yung Guadalupe Onondaga. Now, Chorus of Aguego, I hope you all like the song. It was really interesting listening to the men talk about lacrosse. I learned a lot. And for inviting us. And I hope you all have skana, his peace, and are all well and healthy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was gorgeous. Oh, thank you. And thank you for waiting because of the mix-up with the scheduling. That's really appreciated by everyone. And I know that people have stayed with the discussion after the discussion, the lacrosse discussion, to hear you, who were waiting too. So thank you so much for being part of this. And it really, I think Cheryl said it in the chat, it grounded our session and set us on a good path. And we'll be having our next session is also about the Irish language. It's at 6 p.m., but hopefully we'll join those who want to in the open session space. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.